Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome again to ESS and the second Zoom presentation. This one's on good versus evil in ancient Egypt. Yes, I'm Bill Cherf, Department of History, University of the Imagination. Okay, uh, where are we going? That's the question. And here's the overview. So use it as a sort of template of where we're going to go and what we're going to see. We're going to review some things regarding our modern cultural baggage, something I've done before when talking about religion and magic in ancient Egypt. Talk about the ancient Egyptian beliefs and baggage as well. I'm going to bring up the grid theory again as a way to study this issue. Then we're going to go into words. And then we're going to go from words to duality of divinities. And then we're going to do a practical application of this by examining the Book of the Dead, and in particular, spell number 125. And then at the end, sum it all up. Now let's talk about our modern baggage. Yeah, we got baggage, big time. We first must acknowledge that our inability to fully comprehend the workings of the ancient mind, and then we have to try to do just that. In other words, we're sort of going off the deep end a bit in trying to understand them, but we'll try to do the best we can. This next step, we must try to acknowledge the limitations created by our own culture that will block us from understanding the ancients. And those limitations include things like our Judeo-Christian cultural foundation. This is alien stuff to an ancient Egyptian. The notion of a monotheistic religion, except perhaps briefly under Akhenaten. Our religions are religions of a book which literally tell us what to do and what not to do. And to my best knowledge, the ancient Egyptians didn't have a book of rules. Some might argue maybe the Book of the Dead, the Book of Gates, and maybe a few others might be templates going that way, but it's pretty tough to say. And of course, we have a shared cultural history because Judaism, of course, begat Christianity, and there's a very tight relationship between the two of them. There's another thing that's strange about us moderns. We're logical, courtesy of the Greeks. A plus B must equal C, and for every cause there must be an effect. These are alien concepts to the ancient Egyptians. Also alien to the ancient Egyptians is that we're extremely culturally impatient. Our technology has made us this way. We must have everything right now. And let's face it, folks, we are a click culture. This kind of necessity for speed and almost instant gratification, the ancient Egyptians were far more patient than we were, or we are. Furthermore, everything must have its place. We have great difficulty dealing with loose ends, and we have trouble tolerating that. And of course, there must be an answer for everything. After all, science can solve all problems. And then we have this one, a cultural superiority complex. We're right and you're wrong. That's probably more prevalent today through social media than anything else. And an ancient Egyptian would really scratch their shaved head about that. We also have another obsession that the Egyptians seem to be without, and that's time. We are obsessed with time. We have time on our wrists, and if not on our wrists, we have them on the bottom of our computers, on our personal devices. Time. And the Neolithic period to the pre-dynastic is almost 1900 years. And we calculated very carefully through many scholarly arguments Pharaonic Egypt's chronology from roughly 3000 to 30 BC. And that's a bunch of years, 2970. So from 5000 to 30 BC, that comes out to roughly 248 generations of human experience. My God. Versus our mere 20 generations from the founding of the Jamestown colony. That's how old the Egyptians are. Now, what about the Egyptians' baggage? Their cultural baggage, their beliefs and such that we have difficulty dealing with. And the first big one, of course, is they're a polytheistic culture. We can't deal with that. It's too amorphous. It's too fluid. We can't stand that. Ancient Egyptians had no problem with it. In fact, they sort of thrived around it. Ancient Egyptians also focused on reaching and enjoying the afterlife. Now, let's keep something very clear. We're not talking about reincarnation. We're talking about the traveling of a soul into the underworld, going through a last judgment, and then living eternally in paradise. This is something that we do not deal with today at all. In fact, there are some people who believe in living their life as fully as possible because there's nothing beyond. The ancient Egyptians focused totally on the future. Ancient Egyptians also had this challenge. They were environmentally influenced. First thing that every Egyptian grew up with, from toddler right on to ancient age, is the ever-present cycle of the sun. It's always there. It could be depended upon. Also, the life-giving Nile and its predictable cycles when we're not going through various intermediate periods. These things were constants. These were the tick-tocks, the clocks of the ancient Egyptians. And of course, then there's the consistency of the weather itself. Most of us who've been to Egypt, after 3 days, at least I do, I struggle as to which day is which. Every day is just that perfect, that same, that pleasant, or that gritty because of a sandstorm. And we've got this. Ancient Egyptians had ingrained within them a sense of duality. After all, the Nile Valley, the Black Land, was Kemet, the desert, the Red Land, Deshret, and the two of them were always there. And as John Wilson said so very well in his book, The Burden of Egypt, you can literally stand at that border with 1 foot in the mud and 1 foot in the hot sand. This was something that was clear to the Egyptians and represented life and, of course, death. Another sense of duality that hits them is the remarkable difference between Upper and Lower Egypt. Each one had its own distinct topography, the delta flat as a pancake, and then Upper Egypt being literally encaptured or encapsulated within mountains into a narrow strand, almost like a test tube. And then, of course, they had symbology to represent this, the sedge and the bee, Upper and Lower Egypt. And then we have this. The Egyptians had really kind of a split personality in a way. 42 different administrative provinces. That's where you were born, you grew up, and typically where you died. And in each Sepet, as they called them, each one had its own administrative center, its own religious totem, almost like an NFL team in a major city, and their own religious proclivities as to what they preferred and what they didn't. And then on top of that, the Egyptians were humans. They had neuroses too. They had environmental threats, particularly. Going on the river, which was, of course, the source of life and silt and inundation and that entire cycle, we have hippopotami, extremely dangerous and deadly. Crocodiles, of course, were always in the marshes, in the reeds, everywhere outside of the mud, and sometimes in the mud. Snakes and scorpions, dangerous things, extremely poisonous, especially for infants and young toddlers. In the desert, of course, some people don't even think it's a desert, it's a savanna. We have lions, jackals. Things they couldn't see but were there, of course, are riverborne parasites, the schistosome problem. And then, of course, they always had the fear of low Nile floods. This is why they had granaries. This is why temples had so many granaries, to build up, I guess you could say, emergency stores. Now, in order to deal with this as best we can, I've come up with the grid theory. It's kind of a layman's approach to understanding ancient Egyptian belief, or how to wade through all the gods and the goddesses and seemingly contradictory information. And basically, it's like layers. It's like working with an onion. Imagine, if you will, this three-dimensional grid in your mind, X, Y, and Z dimensions. X dimension is location. We've got 42 possibilities, 42 different sapats, provincial districts with their capitals, each with their own patron divinity and symbols. The Y dimension are the societal groups, the royals, the nobility and military, the priesthoods, the traders, manufacturers, and tradesmen. By far, the majority of the Egyptian population were farmers and finally laborers. Z dimension is time. Are we talking about the Neolithic period, pre-dynastic, pharaonic, of the 31 dynasties? If we use this grid theory, we can understand societal groups, their beliefs, and in a particular time and place. You can keep things straight and hopefully actually get a grip as to what you're actually dealing with. Now for the words of evil and the words of goodness. Let's face it, notions of what constitutes good, goodness, evil, and evilness shift in usage by place, societal group, and time. Just think about your own personal experiences through your own age groups and how things have shifted under your feet like so much sand when talking about things like this. Then we have the issue of words can only approximate the intellectual or emotional meaning of those words. They change over time. This is why we need the grid theory. Context is king at all times. Context, context, context. And then to add to that, we have translation issues. How a German might define a word, an Englishman, a Frenchman, an Italian, a Japanese gentleman, or a Spaniard. These are, again, murky waters to deal with. So let's begin with words for good or goodness. I did some serious searching. Imma, to be kind, gentle, well-disposed, pleasing, gracious, delighted, charmed. An interesting word. One that we recognize rather easily is achen, to be beautiful, as in achanan. Appear beautiful. Excuse me. Bright of face, pleasing, to be kind to. And then, of course, there is noun, feminine noun, Annette, the beautiful one. In this case, usually used with royal ladies like Nefertiti, Nefertari, and such. The big heavy hitter, of course, is Nefer. Beautiful, fair, good, fine, goodly, kind, happy, well, good. Notice, lawful, beautiful, good fortune. Again, context is everything. How is the word being used? Another way of looking at Nefer is to be good, the verb, to be beautiful. And then, of course, we start getting into the crazy things of Nefer Nefer, which, of course, means the best. And then it gets crazier. Nefer Nefer Nefer, exceedingly good. And then, of course, something beautiful, Nefret, good, beautiful things. This is a noun. Well, there's only a handful of good words, words that define the goodness. Nefer predominates, of course. But when we come to words of evil or evilness, the Egyptian vocabulary was quite rich. Makes you wonder just a little bit. Isfet, that which is unjust, a liar, a sinner, falsehood, criminal, wrongdoer, evildoer. And then quite often we see this word paired up with the were sparrow determinative as a exclamation point of sorts, indicating something really bad or really greatly terrible. Isfeti, a plural form of the noun for sinners, malice, enemies, evildoers. It's amazing the context that these things show up in sometimes. Then we get a new word, bin, bad. This is the direct opposite of never. Again, if we see the were sparrow determinative, something really bad or greatly bad. Bin is also used with people, that evil person, evil, bad of character even. And then bin sometimes comes out as the evil that one says or does. So it's actually verbalized in some sort of context. It continues in its broad usage as the evil one. Often again with the were sparrow determinative for something really bad or really evil. And typically when we're talking about the evil one, we'll talk about him shortly. Binet, of course, is a noun for bad, something evil, something tangible. Keep in mind, the Egyptians believed in magic. Keep in mind. And of course, this also is made even more explicit with the were sparrow as an exclamation point. I would be remiss not to include Irit Benet, the evil eye. I know Laura would kill me if I didn't bring it up, but there it is. Now we move on to another bunch of word roots. Nick. Nick as a noun is an evildoer. And again, with the were sparrow, something really bad as an evildoer. In fact, Nick is a dynamic serpent's name. Nid, something bad or unclean. Egyptians were had a fetish about cleanliness and properness, and nid was usually brought up in these sorts of terms. Nunet, it's a plural in this case, for evils generally. And again, we see these in spells typically, with the weir sparrow again as an exclamation point. Nebed, that which is evil or bad. In fact, the evil one. We would think of that almost as the devil. Nebed, destruction, the evil one, those of bad character, enemies of Egypt. These are frightening things to the Egyptians because chaos is the exact opposite of Ma'at, that which is stable, sure, and just. Then we've got this one, Neph, evil, unjust. Again, often appearing with an exclamation point. Neph, do wrong, wrongdoing, someone who does nasty things. And then Ken, that which is evil, lies, malice, that which is bad. Again with an exclamation point. And Net is their word for destruction. Again, the opposite of Ma'at, that which is stable, with an exclamation point often used. This next one, Tecateca, the evil god. This was a first for me. I had never heard of it before. I've never seen a depiction of it, and probably that's a good thing. But Tecateca is something so very, very bad. Makes you wonder whether this is really in the realm of magic or something even darker. Juju, the bad one. Again, with an exclamation point, occasionally. Ooh, bad, evil, again, with an exclamation. And then finally, Duet, the evil one. We will talk about him too soon. So when you compare the list between that which is good and that which is bad, the Egyptians clearly had more words to describe trouble than they'd had for goodness. Makes you wonder, what were they so afraid of? And this leads me back to the whole question of magic, to fend themselves away from that which was bad. Now, duality of divinities fits in here quite a bit. The Egyptian goddess of goodness, without any question, was Hathor. She's a complex goddess, cow-headed, who inspired goodness, joy, fertility, celebration, and of course, love. You would think that might be Isis, but no, Isis is the absolute epitome of the throne. So Hathor is the goddess of goodness. Ma'at, I've mentioned several times already. She's the goddess of terrestrial and cosmic balance, righteousness, common sense. It was a pharaonic quality, along with the Sia, divine knowledge, and Hu, divine utterance to get things done. Ma'at was a positive restraint on behavior. Keep that in mind. And you can always spot Ma by the feather in her crown. Now for the bad guys. The Egyptian gods are demons of evil. Without question, Set was the kingpin here. Divine personification of all that was foreign to the ancient Egyptian culture. Yes, that which is foreign is bad. Bringer of chaos, earthquakes, thunderstorms, eclipses, low Niles, and fire. Set literally incited trickery, envy, disorder, violence. He was blamed for all of these things. And so when we talked about the words of evil that mentioned the evil one, this is the guy. They used those other words instead of using his name. They were so scared of him, they didn't even want to enunciate it. And then there's this demon called Apophis, sometimes Apep, the great demon serpent of the underworld and Ra's most bitter enemy, bringer of chaos and earthquakes, thunder, darkness, storms, and death. He was a pretty awesome demon. It is said that he was 40 feet long, a cobra. His black scales were actually made of slate, and therefore rendering him virtually impermeable. And he spat fire. In other words, the Egyptians were referring to a spitting cobra. Tough nut. Now let's get to the actual practical side of this presentation. How does this fit into Egyptian religion? Perhaps the easiest one to deal with up front is the Book of the Dead. The context for the Book of the Dead was, well, relatively well known. It was developed in the 18th dynasty. It was a magical funerary document, but it was built from the parts of the pyramid texts, parts from the coffin texts, and the addition of brand new stuff. The purpose of the Book of the Dead, or as the Egyptians would say, the coming forth by day. It's a magical guide for the soul's passage through the Egyptian underworld. It's kind of like a roadmap, kind of like a tourist guide, and it's also a protective, magical document. It provided justification for the soul's positive judgment before Osiris and the 42 judges of the underworld. This protected your soul from weighing too much. In short, we're talking about insurance, a funerary insurance policy for you. The Book of Going Forth by Day had 192 possible spells, and no extant copy contains them all. It's impossible, and you'll see why shortly. Some of the spells are hymns to the sun. Some are just good old-fashioned magical spells. The best-known version of the Book of the Dead is of the Theban priest Ani, who lived in the 19th dynasty during the reign of Ramses II. What is so interesting about this insurance policy? It's highly customizable, specifically crafted to the individual according to their means. In other words, you could actually choose your options, just like you do home insurance, auto insurance, life insurance. This was insurance for the afterlife. This is a slide of the Papyrus Ani's Last Judgment. If you take a look at it, to the left you'll see Ani bowing with his wife behind him. And before him is a scale. Anubis is weighing his heart, which is on one scale, against Mot's feather of truth on the other scale. To the right, Thoth, the scribe, is recording the results. Behind him is Amet, the demon god who would devour a soul who was not righteous and just. Whether Anubis is sitting there pulling on the cords of the scale to make sure that the fellow's heart is lighter, I will leave to your interpretation. Across the top banner of this are some of the 42 gods of the various nomes who are sitting in judgment over this proceeding. So, if you look at spell number 125, we are in for a cultural treat. It's called the negative confession. So what is it? It's 42 declarations, one for each nome, god, or totem. 42 declarations of innocence from any evil that might prevent the soul from receiving a positive judgment before the god Osiris. In some respects, it's an interview, a real big one. This spell provides a way for the gods, specifically the 42 gods, to determine a soul's goodness or evilness. The scales will, of course, ultimately adjudicate this based on the weight of the soul against the feather of truth of Ma'at. This spell gives us a peek into the ethical and moral standards of the 18th and 19th dynasties. It's unique in that regard. And so it's really kind of interesting to see what an individual might be worried about when he faces his last judgment. So, here is the papyrus of Hunnefer. His last judgment scene, you can see in the center, one hand is being led in by Anubis, where his heart is being weighed, and Amet is sitting there drooling probably to gobble it up if it's bad. Apparently he did well because in the next frame there, Thoth is recording such that he passed, and he's being led by Horus to Osiris and ultimately to the underworld. And of course, across the top are some of the 42 gods who witnessed this judgment. What is key here is we're talking about the insurance policy of a specific individual of the 18th dynasty who lived during the reign of Horemheb. He was a scribe, which makes him highly educated and potentially very influential. These are the things he was worried about. I have not committed sin. Okay. We have seen the word for sin. It's mentioned here. I have not committed robbery with violence. That's interesting. He's making a distinction between robbery and robbery with violence. I have not stolen. Interesting. It's almost like we're beginning to see the basis for the Ten Commandments. I have not slain men and women. You can be sure that this particular line would not have appeared in the papyrus of a military general. I have not stolen grain. This line might not appear in a farmer's version of the Book of the Dead. I have not purloined offerings. There's a religious connotation here, having to do with dealings with the temple. And if we get a proof of that with the very next one, I have not stolen the property of the god. Which god? Well, he's from Thebes, so guess who? Amun-Ra. I have not uttered lies. I have not carried away food. I have not uttered curses. There is a magical quality to this. and these words in particular. He's referring to specifically the potential of black magic. I have not committed adultery, nor have I lain with a man. This is an interesting admission, because this particular line, number 11, does not appear in many of the other papyri. I have made none to weep. That's an interesting thought. I have not eaten the heart, in essence, acted out of character. I have not attacked any man, even though self-defense is permitted. Again, a military officer or soldier could not have this particular line in his insurance policy. I am not a man of deceit. This is important, especially for a scribe. I have not stolen cultivated land. Notice, cultivated land. He may have stolen land, but it might not have been cultivated. I have not been an eavesdropper. Wow. And I have not slandered anyone. I have not been angry without just cause. That's an interesting legalistic way of putting it. I have not debauched the wife of any man. I have not debauched the wives of other men. The distinctions here are getting rather fine, needless to say, because you cannot lie with your insurance policy statements, but you can certainly walk around some issues, perhaps. I have not polluted myself. Just in this case, it's specifically a ritual purity issue. I have terrorized none. I have not transgressed against the law. I have not been angry. I have difficulty believing that, but he says so. Okay. I have not shut my ears to the words of truth. That's an interesting one. I haven't blasphemed. Another way of swearing, I suppose. I'm not a man of violence. Again, this would be something that could never appear on a military man's insurance policy. I have not been a stirrer up of strife. This is something that really fits into his bailiwick because as a scribe, he's in bureaucracies. And we all know what politics are all about. I have not acted with undue haste. Interesting. I have not pried into others' matters. That's hard to believe in some respects, because if he's a scribe, and if he's copying legal documents, putting together contracts and the like, that must have been tough to do. I have not multiplied my words in speaking. Duplicity. In other words, he didn't double talk. He was a straight shooter, I guess you could sort of say. I have wronged none. I have done no evil. That's kind of interesting. This is the one that I think is really cool. I have not worked witchcraft against the king. It's not to say that he doesn't dabble in witchcraft, but just not against the king. I have never stopped the flow of water of a neighbor. Think about that. In ancient Egypt, desert environment where water is king, this is a big one. I have never raised my voice. Again, like never being angry, I have difficulty with that one. I have not cursed God. I have not acted with arrogance. I have not stolen the bread of the gods. Another pretty obvious what we're talking about here. He hasn't rifled the bakery of the temple. I have not carried away the the kenfu cakes from the spirits of the dead. In other words, when someone left an offering on an offering table before a false door, he didn't take anything. I have not snatched away the bread of children, nor treated with contempt the God of my city. And finally, number 42, I have not slain the cattle belonging to the God. What do we make of this? Keeping in mind, we're talking about a scribe of the 18th dynasty, Horemheb's reign, just past Tutankhamun, and of course the Amarna conspiracy, the Amarna revolution. He was covering his bases to make sure that he got to the afterlife. So let's sum it all up. Our modern sensibilities are very, very different from that of the ancient Egyptians. It's clear. We're different. The ancient Egyptians wholeheartedly grasped what was good and evil, defined it with many, many words. The ancient Egyptians proclaimed their moral innocence with spell number 25 that was highly customizable to their own particular needs, occupation, maybe even proclivities. Finally, spell number 125 was highly customizable to the individual. Fearing the loss of the afterlife, the deceased sought to present themselves in the best possible light before the scales of their last judgment. Thank you, folks, for listening.
Well, Bill, thank you very much. We didn't get any questions in the chat channel that I saw, so I'm going to go ahead and open it up, I guess, and we'll see if we can control everybody trying to speak at once.
Yes, if anyone wants to clap, please feel free to do so, although it may not actually be heard by Bill. The spirit of it will be felt, I'm sure. Anyway.
Rhonda sent in a big yay.
Thank you, Rhonda. Are you weaving right now?
I'm sorry. What was that, Bill?
I was just wondering if Rhonda was weaving.
This is Carol. Can you hear me?
Yes, Carol. How are you?
Well, thank you. Thank you for an excellent presentation. I was wondering about the close mapping between the number of regions and the number of gods. And I suppose some PhD thesis or multiples have tried to map what were the chief concerns of the gods of each of those administrative districts. Are there lots of examples of negative confessions, or is this pretty much the only one we've got?
Oh, we have many examples of the Book of the Dead.
Grass fire along I-15 in southern Utah.
And each one is unique when it comes to spell 125 if it's included in the papyrus.
Were caught in their cars yesterday. Some walking, which was not a good idea either.
So as to the 42 sapaths or gnomes, which one of the gods particularly were involved with this or that. I cannot give you a definitive answer for each one of them, much less a couple of them. But you can guess that anything agricultural probably was shared by several of them. Specifically, the controlling of water to your neighbor or cutting off someone's water. All of them were interested in that. That's for sure.
Bill, Jan has a question she wanted me to relay. And were there always 42 chapters in the Book of the Dead?
There are 42 gods who judged you, not 42 chapters. The total number of possible spells available to you in your customizable document were 192. Laura Engel, do you think there might be a distinction between killing in general and killing a person? I didn't get all of that, Dennis.
Oh, from Laura, you didn't see the question? Okay, do you think there might be a distinction between killing in general and killing a person during a war?
That's a tough one for a modern to answer. Thinking like an Egyptian, Egyptians didn't consider you human unless you spoke Egyptian, good Egyptian. Don't have an answer for that one.
Okay, there's a question from Jim. Did Douglas Adams know spell 125?
What? I don't understand the question.
The answer is 42.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, Jesus. Good one, Jim. Good one.
So my
You nailed
question,
me with that one.
okay, I have a question. It said that one of them was, I have not been angry, and then there was one that says, I have not been angry without just cause. What's the difference?
A lot of these different statements are reused, and some of them are purposely almost like doubled over to cover all possible angles. I don't want to pick on anyone with a legal background, but it really looks like legalese in some cases. They want to make sure that, without question, you know exactly what I'm saying. And if I have to say it several times because I need 42 different statements of innocence, I'll use a couple of them, maybe even repeat a couple of them.
I was going to ask a question. It's sort of based on my understanding of how the Book of the Dead, whichever one you were citing, was actually used by the soul of the deceased person. The answers that needed to be given were originally intended to be spoken at one or another of the various gates. So you went through a number of tests, as it were, and I was thinking that perhaps some of those answers would be duplicated in front of a different deity who was judging you at the moment. So the duplication might not necessarily be implicit in saying the same thing for the same audience. You might actually be giving somewhat similar evidence for a different God. Is that your take, or am I swimming upstream?
Well, your interpretation of that is as good as anybody's. The general feeling is that this particular spell, 125, was basically Legos. It was a take-apart toy. I mean, you could plug in anything you wanted. And depending on your means, your occupation, and your proclivities, you would plug in what you thought would represent you the best. If that meant a few instances of pointing out that you weren't angry with people, that suggests to me that you were a real hothead and you were covering yourself. But that's just my opinion.
Bill, there's a question from Robert Bigelow here.
Hey,
Seti was
Bob.
the name of a famous pharaoh, but his name refers to Set, who was his own personal god. Discuss, please.
I would like to first thank the eminent Hittiteologist of ESS for that penetrating question. Keep in mind, the beginning of the 19th dynasty needed an underpinning, and it wasn't going to be Amun-Ra, so it became Seth. Hence, the predominance of Seth in the 19th dynasty iconography. I think that's the best answer I can give you for the moment, Robert.
And from Leslie, what was the difference between being angry and being angry with just cause?
Yeah, that was the one I asked.
Oh, you already asked. Okay, sorry.
No, that's fine.
No, again, it's perfectly fine. It's a matter of fine degree. How do you get things across?
From David, he had a question earlier. I apologize if you relayed this, but I didn't hear you do it. Do you have any feelings about those issues during the schism between upper and lower Egyptian cultures? Were there regional evils?
Second intermediate period, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Don't know. I'll have to think about that one, David. I'm sorry.
I was also going to mention that it was my take that at the point where the area around Avaris or Pi Ramses was the seat of the Egyptian government, there tended to be a lot of various pharaohs and significant viziers and whatnot who had Set in their name. And I think even Seti the First and Seti the Second, for example, were purportedly born in that area, even though they might have eventually migrated somewhere else. Did that give them any particular difficulty in terms of persuading people from other nomes to follow them in battle? I'm trying to think about the portability of the concept of evil.
Well, some scholars believe that the notion of Seth actually came from the Levantine area and that it was a foreign imported god as early as the Second Dynasty. That said, by the time we're talking 19th Dynasty, we're talking about a brand new dynasty starting up, needing their patron god, it's not Amun-Ra, and running with it. Now, whether or not Seti and his religious totem were accepted by the rest of the kingdom, I have a funny feeling the Egyptians just went with it. Again, I want to point out that we are very concerned about A plus B equals C, and that everything must be neatly organized in a precise manner. The Egyptians weren't all that bummed by that stuff.
Okay.
Bill, I have a question. This is Jeff Stevenson.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi. The pharaohs had loads of stuff, Amduat and other things. Did they have a section where they had to pass the same muster with the weighing of the heart in anywhere in their tombs? Or, I mean, were they as concerned with getting this whole good and evil thing down before getting into the afterlife?
Most assuredly. The royal tombs that we saw just this last January were covered with spells and declarations of innocence and all that sort of thing, all over the walls. They didn't need a papyrus. They carved it on the walls.
Right.
And David Pepper has had his hand raised in the chat room for very patiently. So David, did you have a question? And I've lost David.
Yeah, I don't see him.
Okay. Let's see. I got another hand up. Robert again. Robert Bigelow, did you have a question?
Yes, well, it's basically a comment. Bill, the reason I brought it up was that Set simply doesn't equate to the devil. It's not that absolute. Set is shown teaching the Pharaoh how to shoot arrows, teaching him how to fight. So clearly, this is the concept of the evil god Set doesn't quite square with that particular dynasty. And I don't know whether they had their own particular nasty, possibly Apophis, who also came from the Levant. But it obviously gets a little more complex than just saying, oh, well, Set was the evil one, because he wasn't always.
Well, I would go back to the grid theory to focus in on specific time, date, location, and societal level, and figure out what the relationship was, specifically to those three different descriptors. I know I'm in danger of being overly logical in doing so, but it's the only way to really discern how a god and his or her attributes may change over time depending on conditions, location, and time.
Thank you. There's another question from Rhonda. I don't think she asked this one already. Why is Amun-Re not the chief god in the 19th dynasty?
Where's the capital of the 19th dynasty?
I don't remember.
Ramses.
Yeah, it's Pi-Ramses. It's up north in the Delta.
Really?
That doesn't mean that Karnak was abandoned.
No.
It just was relegated to I don't want to say secondary, but an auxiliary annex of religious.
I had not remembered that.
Yeah.
I was thinking that Seti and Ramesses were. Yeah, I had not remembered that. Thank you.
Now, Rhonda, think about that. Think about all the building that Ramses performed everywhere.
Yes.
The guy was making up for his father.
Huh.
And I think we have
Seti.
David Pepper back.
Yeah, I think. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hi, David.
Okay, great. Hi.
Our video is off again.
Yeah, enjoyed the presentation, Bill. A quick question though on your grid.
Yeah.
You talked about one point on the grid, one time, one place, one class. How does this change over time, place, and person?
Well, the easiest way I can think about it, if I was to investigate the characteristics of a god or goddess and how they changed over time, I would have to ask myself, who's worshiping this individual? Where are they? And what time period? And if you want to sort of string it one way or the other, you can go temporally, you can go, how is, for instance, Mot perceived in Thebes versus Heracompolis or whatever. I mean, it gives you a flexibility and an ability to me to get a grasp on things and how they changed and morphed, I guess you could sort of say. Because to the Egyptians, these things were constantly fluid.
Thanks.
You're most welcome.
You heard me.
Yeah, I also heard the clink of your wine glasses.
That wasn't mine. I don't have
Who's
that.
drinking out there?
Ooh, dang. That's tomorrow night.
Okay. Any other questions,
And the
folks?
videos are all off. None of the videos are on. I can only see Dennis and Bill, and then I see Leslie as a black screen.
Yeah, that's right. Me too. I can't see anybody. I have no grid.
Leslie,
Yeah.
how come we can't see
Yay.
anyone else?
I think it's
Must have
All the
got
videos
their
off.
own video.
the wizard behind the curtain. He's done it.
Let me see if I can change that.
And on my screen, I have no way to turn on my own video or see anybody else's.
Yeah, ours was on briefly, and then there was a thing that popped up and said that the host changed something, so.
We'll blame it on Dennis then.
Yeah.
He's the Wizard of Oz.
Don't
Oh,
look behind
good.
the
It's not
curtain.
just me.
No, it's just would be nice to see some of everybody's faces again. We miss you guys.
That's the truth.
Yeah, sorry about the tinking noise. That was me.
I see Jeff.
Yay, there's Jeff.
Somebody's found the magic formula.
It's just making everybody.
There we go.
There's Rodney. You're getting there.
Hey, Rodney, how are you?
Doing well, doing well,
Aha.
doing well, doing well.
Hey, Jan.
Excellent.
There we go.
There's Rhonda.
Yay.
Starting to see some.
I've been promoted.
And I see Jan.
Susie says hello to everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
A blubbering has finally beamed in.
I'm seeing it from Florida.
Settings.
Anita's still off.
Gallery view. Yeah.
We're here.
Yeah, the
David-
gallery is the best one.
David, are you in a wormhole?
Yes, I was doing some gravitational studies
Ooh,
earlier.
Aurora.
There were some repercussions.
Ooh, the Aurora.
I'm waiting
Nice.
for the tidal forces to get me at any time now.
So
Maybe
Bill,
James-
I was wondering, Bill, if now was the principal god under Ramses and Seti Set? Because I mean they were both Set worshippers. I was just wondering if that was the principal god under Ramses.
That was the patron god of their dynasty.
Ones.
Amun-Ra was still there, big and bad, but they couldn't use Amun-Ra as a patron for their dynasty.
Yet
They were
still had to-
they were northerners on top of it.
they still had to be careful because at Abydos, all of Seti's cartouches don't spell out Seti. They substitute glyph so that it doesn't say Seth in because it's Osiris's place, right?
Of course.
You got to hedge your bets.
I mean, there was a reason why they had 4 throne names.
Yeah. Now, did it? I mean, I'm just kind of, I'm seeing this now a little bit clearer. You brought that's just really interesting to me, and I like to investigate that a little bit more. I've always liked the history of the evolution of the cult of Amun-Ra and how after the Hyksos were kicked out, how Amun became all that. So I just.
It's a winning side.
Well, exactly. Keep in mind that the Egyptian revolt against the Hyksos came from Thebes. Who's in Thebes? Amun-Ra. Where are all the spoils and tribute going to go that ensured all the Egyptian victories? To Amun-Ra. You can see how this sort of works out.
David, were you about to say something? Your mic went hot.
Which David?
David Pepper.
No,
I'm the only other David.
That's the cat.
cat started purring.
Ah, Cat had a question.
It's an
Bill,
Egyptian
you're
god.
going to prepare yourself to take a translation from last
She's
chat.
They just wanted to get a word in for bust.
Yeah, she's a
I
follower.
Yeah.
Just so long, it's not Sekhmet.
We're in trouble then.
Yep, yep.
Well,
Well,
there's a
Bill,
duality.
were
Second.
there any ultimate takeaways that you wanted us to retain when we went back to our real lives? Yes, you seem to have a Wookiee or something in the background there.
It's a Bigfoot statue. I don't know. Takeaways are kind of difficult to put your finger on. The one that really stumped me was, in my research, was the discovery of an evil god that I had never heard of. That one just blew my mind. So I relegated that one to the realm of magic, probably dark magic. That was a personal sort of discovery.
Was it one whose name we should carefully avoid speaking in public environments?
Oh, like Cthulhu?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they actually had about 29 demons that I can recall being mentioned in either the Book of Ani or the Book of Coming Forth by Day. And I think there were at least 13 mentioned in the Amduat.
And most of them are snakes.
Snakes, there were a couple of scorpions.
Yep.
There were a couple that were fire demons, I recall. Jeff, do you have any firm impressions on how many demonic names might have been mentioned? And they usually had something bad that would happen to you if you didn't make it through a particular gate. We seem to have either a football player or Cthulhu coming on board here.
Old racing helmet.
Don't make me pull out my fez, okay?
Oh,
No, not
that would trump the entire situation.
I'm follically challenged. I have a lot of
It
hats.
has vanished.
I thought the hats were to retain the hair, keep it from being ripped out by the roots from all the high winds that we've been having.
Yeah.
No.
Were there any other questions that folks didn't get in? I noticed a few people had hit the question and answer button. I don't see any hands being raised.
Her royal kittenness has disappeared.
Ah,
I was going to.
She left.
I was going to introduce you to an offspring of Bastet.
Oh, where is she?
She seems to have changed dimension.
She's a portal princess.
Something. Hopefully she's not inside the couch again.
Oh dear.
But no,
Yeah.
but
I
Be
left
careful
her
where you
somehow.
sit.
half an hour ago she was downstairs eating the older cat's food in front of his face.
Evil.
Well, she's the goddess.
Yes.
Oh, Laura has a camera?
Laura?
she's moved up in the world.
Yes.
She's
Hi, Laura.
become real.
Hey, Laura.
Hello.
Yay. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
It's good to see you.
Finally.
Finally.
So,
We can't hear you very well, but we can see you.
okay, well, you know, I got it today, so I didn't
Oh,
have to hook it up. So
excellent.
I'm
Awesome.
not sure of it yet.
Brand new, breaking it
working.
in, huh? Good.
No, I suggest for the next meetings that we do like suggest dressing up. You know, like a, you know,
Hats.
a fez.
Everybody wear hats.
Or
We
just
can
like
do
I said,
that.
you know, like Judy Jetson used to do, a little mask in front of, or like the Phoenician mask.
Uh-oh. Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're there.
Well, you had the beard. I just was wondering what you had done with the headdress. I think Jeff and Rodney are also pretty well equipped, and Jay as well.
We'll have to have a virtual Halloween party.
No, I think Halloween's going to be big this year. You know, masks are all the thing.
You notice that?
Yeah, this is the first time I've gone forth in public without a mask in about 4 months.
Oh, Laura, that's really quite elegant.
So,
Excellent.
And the pectoral.
Yes. Clever.
Oh yeah, see, a little jaunty.
Oh, Laura, personality defining.
Ow, ow.
The cat has Bastet has appeared again.
Oh my gosh, Carol.
Oh no, Carol. Is that Carol or Jay?
Carol.
Jay has a separate
Oh,
window.
there Jay is.
Carol, where? I can't see her.
She's the sun.
This Aten coming out. Carol is the Aten.
Oh, I can't see her.
There she is. She may have scrolled off the bottom of your screen depending on what you have the resolution set to.
Right
I
down
guess
there.
Jay is far too dignified to have a mask to, or maybe.
Yeah, I can only see the person who's talking. I can't see everyone.
Oh,
Carol,
if you go to the very top,
got it.
you can hit gallery view.
Fixed it. Okay. I'm used to using WebEx, not Zoom.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Yes, Carol. There we go.
Hi, Anita.
Hi, how you doing?
Just saw you there. Great. Considering.
Been working around the yard.
You won't recognize the place next time.
You usually have a couple of questions for our speakers. Did you have any that I didn't see displayed on the Q&A? Can you hear us?
Who are you speaking to?
Yeah.
That's the other history club, Rhonda.
Hey, Rhonda.
Jesus, just
Yeah.
photo.
They're sitting very still.
It's the only hat I could lay hands on.
Watch that! I'll start showing pictures of my
Well,
cat.
I think we're just coming up on the hour. Actually, we're half hour over our normal window. Do I hear any motions to adjourn?